Welcome to Disunion, the Government Union Report, the podcast where we delve into the ever-evolving landscape of public sector labor policy and law. I'm your host, David Osborne, and I'm excited to be your guide through the complex world of government unionization. We bring in experts and individuals with hands-on experience navigating the challenges and opportunities surrounding the unionization of government employees. From the latest legal developments to the practical insights that shape the policies, we've got it covered. So get ready to gain a deeper understanding of the newsmaking issues that impact public sector labor policy across the nation. My guest today is John Grande. John is a physical education teacher for Hartford Public Schools in Hartford, Connecticut, where he's taught for over 30 years. And last year, with the help of a public interest law firm called the Fairness Center, John won an unfair labor practice charge against his union, which refused to represent him in a workplace disciplinary matter because he was not a union member. Right now, also with the help of the Fairness Center, he has a pending lawsuit against the Hartford Board of Education, among others, directly addressing the disciplinary matter itself. So, John, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
So, John, I've learned a little bit about you by looking at the pleadings in your cases, but we haven't actually spoken before, so this is exciting for me. I'm interested in learning a little bit more about what you've experienced and how your experience might have a broader impact on the labor and educational world. So we should start here because I mentioned that you were the subject of a workplace disciplinary matter by your employer, the Hartford Public Schools. You know, people tend to assume that when a teacher is disciplined, he must have done something wrong, maybe even dangerous. So, John, I imagine this is going to take a little backstory, but can you explain what got you in trouble here?
About 3 years ago, I attended this professional development, and it was titled Identity and Privilege. And during this time, we were asked to participate in this activity where we were to answer a series of questions, and they were under headings like race, gender, religion, sexual preference. And if we were to answer yes to any of the questions, then we would be considered to have privilege. And I noticed that the questions were strategically worded in such a way where somebody like me and others like me would be answering yes to all the questions. They were actually gaslighting questions. So at the end of this exercise, we were broken up into small groups and breakout sessions because this was all on Zoom. And we were asked to discuss this question. And the question was, how did it feel to engage in this activity? So I think I was one of the senior teacher, one of them in the group, and everybody was quiet. And I opened it up by saying, well, I was just man bashed and white shamed. I'm going to sit here quietly. And another teacher chimed in with saying, hey, I've worked hard for everything that I got in life, and I have nothing to apologize for. That's when I decided to not be quiet and came back in again and said, listen, at the time I was in the system for 32 years, and all the kids I've ever taught were all minorities. I said, I've never had to sit through one of these things before, and all I know are minority kids. I said, to have, the way I looked at it is I have a bunch of, a handful of administrators who have so much less teaching experience than I, if any at all, telling us that through this activity, we can better relate to our students. Well, 32 at the time, 35 right now, I've been relating to my students just fine. I don't need somebody with no teaching experience telling me that, how I can better relate to them. So 3 months later, I find out I'm the subject of an investigation for employee misconduct. And that's officially when the witch hunt began for me.
How'd you find out, John?
Well, officially I received an email from one of the district officials, but I received a notification. I received a tip-off early on that an email was sent out about me. And it mentioned that a member of that group, it was an apology email saying that a member of the group was hostile, aggressive, inappropriate, creating an unsafe working environment for everyone to learn. And that came out a few weeks after this PD.
Okay, so hold on. So you got to go to this required training, right?
Yes.
This is your employer sponsored training. They're trying to get you guys to see your white privilege in some sense,
so to speak. Yeah, it was identity and privilege. It's part of like CRT is how I looked at it.
And then when you say an email went out to the group, that was the group that participated in this particular activity on Zoom?
Yeah,
okay.
Everybody but me.
Got it. And they were asking about you though.
They were referencing a member of the group without my name being mentioned, but it was me because I was the only one that was under investigation, and I was the only one that never received the email. So 3 months after the PD, I find out officially that I'm under investigation. And then some months later, that what I call witch hunt ends up in a kangaroo court. And there, in that time, I viewed that as the truth didn't matter. The facts didn't matter. What mattered was their agenda. I knew I was going to lose. A few months after that, I received a written reprimand that placed in my personnel file for the first time in my career. And shortly after I received the reprimand, I filed a grievance, and my union did file the grievance. I went through the grievance hearing, and no surprise, I lost. After I lost, I contacted the union and the teachers union and asked them, I said, all right, well, I knew I was going to lose. Let's go to arbitration. What do I have to do? And I was told by one of the vice presidents that arbitration was reserved for dues paying members. That's when I made a few phone calls, and I ended up getting hooked up with the Fairness Center, of which filed a complaint with the State Labor Board in Connecticut. And ultimately, this past August, the Labor Board actually sided with me, which the Labor Board in Connecticut is pretty pro-union. They did their due diligence. It was a pretty lengthy report. And they actually scolded the teachers union for how they conducted themselves. I was basically denied the right to clear my name because of that.
You were denied the right to clear your name?
Well, I was denied arbitration. In Hartford, the grievance is a 3-step process. The first step goes to the superintendent. Well, that's going to get dismissed. Then the second step goes to a hearing. That was a joke. And the third step is arbitration, and that goes to an independent third party. That was the only chance I had to clear my name, and I was denied that because they didn't take me to arbitration.
Yeah, and all of this process that you're talking about, this 3-step process, would have been laid out in the collective bargaining agreement, right?
It is laid out in the collective bargaining agreement. I cannot go to arbitration. No teacher can go to arbitration on their own. You have to go through the teachers union.
Yeah, so the teachers union that arbitrated, that bargained over the agreement, would have put in this provision about arbitration, and in the agreement, surely they're the only ones who can request arbitration. You
Correct.
Can't do it on your own. Yeah, but ultimately that's applicable to both members and non-members. And it sounds like you were a non-member at that time.
Yeah, I was a member of the union for 29 years. I was actually at one time, I was heavily involved. I was a building rep. I served on 2 contract negotiation teams, actually ran for an executive officer spot. But I realized that the union was not representing the teachers like they should have been, and thinking, why should I pay $1,000 a year when I'm not getting the representation? So I really didn't leave until Janus came out, and that was in 2018. So that's when I resigned from the union. But because the teachers union is the sole and exclusive bargaining agent for teachers by law, they have to represent you regardless of your membership status, and they violated that.
Yeah, and so it's remarkable in this case what you mentioned, that the union refused to represent you on the grounds that you're a non-member. I know some states where that is legal, but in Connecticut, to my knowledge, the union's not allowed to do that. right?
No, they have a duty to present everyone.
So in some sense, the labor board wasn't creating new law or anything like that. It was just sort of stating what had always been the case. But perhaps many folks of your kind, that, non-members, may have been told that repeatedly and yet didn't have the opportunity or the chance or the willingness to file a lawsuit to see it through, right?
Yeah, it solidified the law is what it did. And there's still a lot of teachers out there that are unaware of what the law is, and even my case.
Well, I was going to ask you, was the union's response, having been around the union, in the union? I read at one point you were a union steward. Was the union's response to you at that time, is that unusual in Connecticut?
Well, it was unusual in the fact that it's never happened to me before. I don't think that they really researched it. They did have resources they could have called and referenced, but they didn't do that.
Well, yeah, so I was reading about you being a union steward. I don't know if that was in the pleadings or if it was in a news article, but you were dues-paying member, you said, for 29 years. What led you to become a steward, and what was interesting to you? What was beneficial about the union?
I've always been pro-teacher, and back then when I became a steward, the unions were pro-teacher. And I just kind of seen this shift where they're not representing teachers like they should be representing teachers. And even now they're getting more involved in this political stuff, which they really have no business being involved. I understand it's the Democratic Party is supporting them, but that's not their job. That's not why unions were created. And when I entered into teacher negotiations for the contract, I always put the teachers first. I didn't put myself or any political agenda first. You're representing the teachers as a union official. Teachers are number one, and that's who you're supposed to look out for.
So when they didn't file for arbitration, what happens next? Do you go back to them and tell them what the law is as you understand it, or how does that look?
Well, by my contract, you have a 10-day window. So if you don't file for arbitration in 10 days after you find out you lost a grievance, you're out of luck. So when I think I sent an email in maybe the day after I found out that I lost a grievance, 5 days passed before I even got a response. And I got that response. So I followed up again. I said, well, let me ask you this. If I rejoin the union, does that make me eligible? And the next day he says, no, you would have had to been eligible from the time that this incident happened. So now we're on day 7. And I was in the process of, I contacted the Yankee Institute, and one of their fellows, Frank Ritchie, hooked me up with the Fairness Center. The Fairness Center really didn't take my case until maybe 3 months later, but we're well past the deadline. And once the complaint was filed, now the union goes ahead and files for arbitration. But they missed it by 6 months. So there was no doubt in my mind I was going to lose. So I had to go to an arbitration to see if my case was arbitrable on the merits. But I lost.
Well, yeah. Well, that's one thing I found interesting about your case is that the union could have potentially decided from the outset that there was just either no merit to your case or it didn't fit with their agenda. And perhaps on that basis, they could have gotten away with not filing for arbitration. But they did it instead on the basis that you're a non-member. So this is a fairly common thing across the country. Unions like to make unionized employees believe that membership entitles them to representation. And the truth is something called exclusive representation entitles them to representation. So exclusive representation is sort of this idea that the union's going to represent everyone in a bargaining unit, both members and non-members, equally. Yet that doesn't make much money for a union if the non-members can get the representation without paying for it. So there have been some states where unions have gotten laws passed that allow them, to safely do that, to restrict membership on the basis of union members. Sorry, to restrict representation on the basis of membership. But in Connecticut, that's not one of those states. So what's just strange to me and what speaks to the culture in Connecticut, this is part of what I was asking you earlier, what speaks to the culture, the union culture in Connecticut, is that this union president, union steward, whoever it was, denied you representation firmly on the basis that you're a non-member and thought probably that was okay. So let me get back to what I was asking. When you were a union steward and when you're a member of the union, did you sense that kind of a culture within this union? Was it discriminatory in this kind of way?
No, it was a different leadership back then too. And I think what's happening more so now than ever, the unions are not the unions of the 70s. That's when they went all out. And plus, back then teachers were able to, I believe they were able to strike, but then binding arbitration came in. It actually hurt the teachers in Connecticut with this. Because when you look around the country and you see all these other school systems who aren't getting contracts they like, they're all striking. Well, there's such a teacher shortage. It's to their advantage, but not in Connecticut. But I believe that's been in place for maybe 50 years. Might have been a good thing back then. It's hurt us now. But I think what's happening now with the union leadership is these officials, they're not coming in as union leaders. They're coming in as union activists. And they're spending, more time pushing these political issues as opposed to just representing those who they were supposed to, which is why they were created in the first place, to represent the teachers or the workers.
Yeah. So what does that look like from a teacher's perspective? I have been a teacher very briefly, but I was in a charter school without a union. So I wonder, what does the union's political activity look like to a teacher? Is it emails? Is it phone calls? Are people showing up at your door? What is it? Can you describe what that might look like to you?
Well, they have a Facebook page and I don't do Facebook, so I don't see that stuff, but it seems, when you have, it's good to have a positive professional working relationship with the other side. But it still has to be somewhat adversarial. And I'm viewing, at least my union, it as being a little too chummy. And you're not going to get anything for the teachers when you take that attitude, or it's like one of appeasement. Let's not file the grievances. They're not that. I think grievances in Hartford are an absolute joke. You're going to lose at the first two steps no matter what. You're only going to get a fair shake when you take the power and control away from the district administrators. But it has to be adversarial at some point. It seems like it's more, nice kissy face, and you can't be like that.
So this might have been, at least we don't know what was happening behind the scenes, but this might have been an example of that, right? The union decides that it sees these trainings, which I want to return to in a minute, but sees these trainings and basically allows them to happen when the union, I suppose, could object or could be part of the planning process when it comes to these trainings, right?
I have every reason to believe they were part of implementing this stuff. It was actually revealed that there was a lot of conversations going on between the board and the HFT, which is the Hartford Federation of Teachers, the teachers union leadership, at delivering these types of trainings, and that's not their place.
Yeah, it does pretty closely match what we've seen from unions, particularly since Janus. At one point prior to Janus in 2018, it was difficult for some non-members to tell whether their fees were going towards political issues. And when you went on the teachers union website at that time, it was hard to see a connection between, teachers unions and politics. You could find it, but it was a little more difficult. Nowadays, you can go on and there's just a ton of material that connects them with CRT and some of these other issues that, look, whether you agree with them or not, it just kind of seems odd for a union to be fashioning them. I have one example of the NEA has actually put together a model resolution for school boards that would further restrict what teachers can say in a classroom. It particularly goes after their usage of pronouns, and then encourages other teachers and students to complain to the school board about their use of pronouns. And again, I don't care what you think about pronouns or CRT or any of these kinds of issues. It's very remarkable, very strange to see a union encouraging people to get teachers in trouble for it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they're encouraging anything, but it's more or less, are they going to represent you when you do get called on it? And to be honest with you, when I went through this witch hunt investigation, whatever you want to call it, the union, they didn't pound the table in my defense. I pounded the table in my defense, and I planned on doing that in arbitration. I was just denied that.
So you were disciplined. You received a reprimand, probably in the form of a letter.
I received it was a letter of reprimand in my file, finding me committing an act of creating a hostile environment, in violation of employee having employee misconduct, violation of the employee handbook. I also had to undergo sensitivity awareness training, and I was threatened with further discipline up to termination.
Well, I saw in the complaint some of the language from this letter quoted. You're accused of engaging in, quote, inappropriate and unprofessional conduct, making inappropriate and unprofessional comments. And then there's a kind of an odd quote here. Employee behavior. You were instructed that employee behavior that does not reflect positive social values will have a negative influence on students and fellow employees and is unacceptable. And I had to make sure I was reading this correctly, but what they were referring to was your statements when you were asked how you felt.
Yeah, apparently, right? Because I didn't go along with the group think, I violated the employee handbook.
But they asked you how you felt.
The question specifically was stated, and I quote, "How did it feel to engage in this activity?" And that was supposed to be what was discussed.
So with that, I want to move from so you won the unfair labor practice charge. They call them prohibited practices in Connecticut against your union. But then after that, you initiated a new lawsuit, this one against the Hartford Public Schools, among others. And this is about the First Amendment, right?
Basically, I was for answering a question, I was targeted, attacked, disciplined, and threatened with further discipline for answering a question because it did not fit the narrative that a handful of Hartford district officials were trying to push on the teachers.
And why did you feel you had to file this particular lawsuit?
Well, I had the support of the Fairness Center, and thank God for them, because I would not be where I am right now if it wasn't for them. I mean, really, what public school teacher has the financial resources to go through litigation of this nature? When you're going against boards of eds who have retainers and unlimited budgets, same with the unions. They have unlimited resources, and so does the Fairness Center now because they represent me. So I'm leveling the playing field right now because of them.
And at least as I read it, the complaint itself would kind of seek to do what the union was supposed to have done in the first place. So you've taken care of the union misconduct, but outstanding is, the reality is they never filed a notice of arbitration and never took it to arbitration. So this letter is still in your file, I assume, this reprimand, and without some kind of action directly going after the discipline itself, it could haunt you forever. So that's the way I read the complaint. At least it seeks to go after that on the basis that the First Amendment was violated, not on the basis that DEI itself or CRT or whatever you want to call it might violate the First Amendment, but that they asked for your response and you gave it, and then penalized you for it, right?
And interestingly enough, in the employee handbook for which I allegedly violated, there's a section in there that says freedom of speech that says no Hartford school employee will be the subject of any disciplinary action for exercising their right to free speech. So they're violating their own handbook in telling me I violated the handbook.
So tell me a little bit about what it's like to initiate a legal action. I mean, now you've done it twice. Gosh, when you've done this and when it implicates the union, what happens to your relationship with the union? Have they come after you or tried to make you feel like an outcast? Anything like that?
Not directly. I don't really know what goes on behind the scenes, but as far as my colleagues and other teachers around the system, I've got nothing but positive support over this. I know, a lot of teachers are complaining about the union, and they have they have the right to leave, and they're still going to be represented. But a lot of them, there's two reasons why teachers really don't understand in Connecticut why they can leave the union. One is it's a lack of awareness, and it's a lack of knowledge. The other is a lack of courage. For some reason, they think that they have to be in the union in order to be protected, and the law states that they don't. And with respect to my own union, like I said, when I fought these accusations, it was me who fought them. The union was there; they were present, but did they really do anything to help me? No, I did it all. So, what I say is, what good does it do you to have a union that's weak and ineffective? You might as well just keep the money yourself and fight it on your own, because they still have to represent you.
Have other teachers in your district responded to that as well?
As far as leaving, or as far, like I said, some have left. Yes, they have. Some are saying, they're waiting for the next contract to come out before they make a decision, which they're going to be heading into negotiations this summer or next fall. We're in the second year of a 3-year, and in the third year they're going to be negotiating. But Hartford has a close to a $78 million deficit. I'm telling them, right, you're not getting anything. I said, so they look at, they have that mentality where they're going to leave if they don't like what they get. I have the mentality is, why don't you leave now and send a message that you better get us something good if you want me to come back. Otherwise, I'm staying out. I don't know what's going to happen, but I do not see the teachers in Hartford really getting anything. It's not going to affect me any. I'll probably be retired by that time. But when you think about the last contract that we've had, it was in the height of negotiations. It was fall of 21, and there was a teacher shortage back then, and inflation was 6.8% and rising. And all they can pull off was a 1.75 for the teachers at the top, with all the COVID money that was there. That would be the time to go to arbitration. You really don't want to go to arbitration over contract, but that would have been the time, because when you're looking, an arbitrator is going to look at the city's ability to pay. Well, you had a lot of money back then, so that would be the time to go. They lost their chance, and unfortunately, in Hartford, it's the veteran teachers on the top step that have been getting the screw job for at least 12 years right now. New ones coming in, they're being paid $5,000 signing bonuses. Which is, I have no problem with that. But, what's the guarantee those teachers are going to stay? Why not reward the teachers that have been there for decades? And this is what the union should be pushing on the district, but they're not doing that.
God, well, you sound like a very pro-union guy. So I'm kind of, I'm interested in. So what do we do? What do we do with unions? As a pro-union guy, how do you reverse that kind of a decline, I guess?
Well, I look at myself as more pro-teacher than anything. I'm not anti-union. It's given my history, I just always thought that the union's job is to protect and advocate for the teachers, and that's it. Don't talk about the kids. The teachers are the ones who look out for the kids. The teachers need a group looking out for them. How can you do that? You just got to make a stand. You got to get people in there that are actually going to do what's best for the teachers. But the way things are going right now, if unions, I tell teachers in other districts, if your union is supporting these political agendas to push CRT, to push DEI, in Connecticut, you have the power to pull your money. And the more that you pull the money from them, the bigger message that you're sending to them. You better knock this stuff off, and you better start doing the job, your job with respect to why unions were created in the first place.
Well, that's it. That's interesting. So if you're starting a new union and you're doing it from scratch, it sounds like it's about leadership to you.
Oh, like I said, yeah, they're not coming in as union leaders; they're coming in as activists, and there's a difference. And I know there's other unions out there. there's some individuals I know that are trying to push alternative unions. How you do that, I don't know. But the NEA and the AFT have a stronghold on the teachers unions, and it's really, at least in Connecticut, the teachers, I think, can really change that just by, money talks. You pull your dues, you make it. You make a statement.
Well, I'm gonna ask you to sort of just take a wild guess here, a wild swing at this. But some of the ideas that we've talked about here are ideas like recertification. So recertification would basically allow teachers to vote periodically on a union, so that the union could only continue as the exclusive representative if it were able to secure a majority support from workers, say every 5 years or every 6 years, something like that. Do you think that kind of reform would keep unions more accountable to membership?
Well, it could be, but in Connecticut, I think what'll keep them accountable is teachers pulling their dues.
It's about the money.
Yeah, it's, he who controls the purse strings pretty much controls everything. And especially in Hartford, now we have 3 detached duty officers. So what I mean by that is they get their teaching salary and they get their benefits and they get a stipend, but they don't teach. They're at the headquarters, and the teachers pay 100% of all of that. Now, early on this year, there was a push that the union asked the building reps to give up a prep period so that they can walk them around the school. This is during the school day. In all my years in Hartford, I've never seen this happen before. They're walking around the school day, and they know who are dues-paying members and they know who are not dues-paying members. So they were asked to walk them around to pretty much the non-dues-paying members. I really don't want to use the word coerce, but some of these teachers, when I talked to them, they were made to feel uncomfortable, almost pressured into, to joining them. And to me, that's a sign of desperation, because if the teachers pull their money, then these officials are not going to be getting paid the big bucks that they're making.
Wait, so let me make sure I understand the detached teaching. What would you call them? Detached teachers?
Detached duty, which means you're getting your teaching salary, but you're not teaching. You're full-time at HFT headquarters.
Oh, working for the union.
Correct.
Do you have a position title with the union when you do that?
Well, it would be president, first vice president, and second vice president.
Got it. Okay. So I'm fairly familiar with this kind of practice. Typically, they're going around filing grievances and negotiating contracts and stuff like that.
Well, I mean, they haven't really filed too many grievances. So the other thing is there's really no oversight. What are you doing during the day? I mean, clearly maybe the vice presidents would be supervised by the president, but who supervises the president? Is there any oversight? I'm sure they sign in when they get there, but where are their whereabouts during the day? Who's keeping track of that? I don't think anybody knows. And they're making good money. Yeah.
There may also be some political activities, I suppose.
I'm sure there is. Like I said, I don't, they have a Facebook page. I don't go on, I don't do Facebook. So and I'm not interested in looking into it, but I know they have been losing members. I don't know what the numbers are, but they have been, and they started this aggressive push to kind of force recruit.
Well, so let's wrap up. I want you to sort of wrap things up by telling me what you want to see happen here. I mean, what's the outcome that you want to see happen, not just for you, but for Connecticut teachers after you've long retired?
Well, when you think about it, this whole thing started because I answered a question that was asked. And because I answered it, like I said, I was targeted, attacked, and punished. And I was done. This was done by district officials who had power and authority of which they abused. The playing field was not level. When I went through that investigation, the facts did not matter. The truth did not matter. What mattered was their agenda. And they did get away with it. Now with this lawsuit, the playing field is now becoming level. And my goal is to hold these district officials accountable for how they conducted themselves during this investigation/witch hunt in which they violated my First Amendment right to free speech. And I'm looking forward to my case advancing.
Great. Well, we'll be watching the case from here too. I'm interested to see what happens as well. Thanks for coming on, John. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Anytime.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of Disunion, the Government Union Report. We hope you found today's exploration into public sector labor policy both insightful and thought-provoking. Special thanks to all of you for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's discussion and want to stay informed about the latest developments, don't forget to subscribe to Disunion, the Government Union Report, on Spotify or your favorite podcast platform. Your support means the world to us. I'm David R. Osborne, reminding you that understanding labor policy is crucial for shaping the future. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and keep making a difference.